if the Fed allows rates to rise to 1%. But if inflation continues to accelerate, which it likely will, real interest rates will actually be falling, even as the Fed is slightly raising nominal interest rates. So they're actually pursuing a more stimulative policy while pretending to tighten. And of course, the Fed continues to print money. It continues to monetize government debt. Not only have they not stopped the presses, they're still cranking them up. They continue to buy U.S. government bonds and mortgage-backed securities. Now, the Fed is saying that they're going to wind that down, but they haven't actually done it yet. So they're continuing to make this inflation problem worse. But here is the bigger problem. The only way the Fed was able to justify these artificially low interest rates and quantitative easing was under the pretense that an absence of inflation gave them the leeway to do that. In fact, they actually had the gall to claim that inflation was too low when it was below 2%, even though had they measured it honestly, it would have been above 2%. But using the rigged data that they had, they were able to point to an inflation rate of 1.5, 1.6, and claim that that wasn't enough, that we needed 2%, that their mandate was 2% CPI, which of course it's not. Their mandate is price stability. So stable prices are prices that are flat. They don't go up. If their mandate was 2% increasing prices every year, then their mandate wouldn't be price stability. It would be prices going up by 2% a year. But they kind of redefined their mandate to a rising cost of living. And then they claimed that the cost of living wasn't rising fast enough. And therefore, they were going to pursue this easy money policy in order to deliver a more substantial annual increase in the cost of living. Now, apart from the pure nonsense of that argument, because too little inflation was not a problem. In fact, any inflation is a problem, and the more you have, the bigger the problem. But now that inflation is triple or more, 2%, there is no way the Fed can justify maintaining the artificially low interest rates, because even if they raise interest rates to 1 or 2%, they're still artificially low.
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information, and it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And
there's no justification for that if you're going to claim it's because inflation was too low. Now, inflation being too low was never the real reason. That was just the excuse that the Fed gave. The only reason that the Fed kept rates so low was because we had such a gigantic debt bubble that those low interest rates were the only thing keeping us afloat. If interest rates were allowed to normalize, we would have a far worse financial crisis than 2008. We would have all the big banks that we bailed out failing. We'd have a crash in the stock market. We have a crash in the real estate market. And not only would the private sector have difficulty servicing its debts if the Fed were to allow interest rates to go to a natural level, but the United States government would also be in the same predicament, maybe even in a worse predicament. The U.S. government would be forced to default on its national debt. We've got a $3 trillion national debt right now, and it's financed at 1%. And it's not financed at 1% with 30-year government bonds. It's financed with 90-day T-bills. The government has to constantly roll over this low-yielding debt in order to keep the financing at 1%. Well, 1% of 30 trillion is 300 billion. Well, what if interest rates went up to 10%, which is half of what they got to in 1980 under Paul Volcker? 10% of 30 trillion is 3 trillion. There's no way the government can come up with an extra $3 trillion each and every year to service the national debt. So the only way to keep the government in the position where it can pretend it's solvent is to keep interest rates artificially low. But the Fed couldn't tell the markets the truth about why it was keeping interest rates low. So it came up with a lie about inflation being too low. Well, what's the new lie going to be? Because now inflation is too high. In fact, inflation is now the number one problem on the public's mind. The public is dealing with sticker shock every time they go to the supermarket, the gas station, and that's only going to get worse. And this is the worst possible problem for the Fed, because there is no way to actually fight inflation without creating a massive financial crisis and putting the U.S. government into insolvency. In fact, Powell himself admitted that we are on a fiscally unsustainable path, but he says that we can handle the debts because interest rates are low.
I have bad news for you. If you're not rich by now, you're screwed. And if you're in debt, you're even double screwed. How so, you might wonder? Well, the sad truth is that you're working your whole life to make someone else rich. The mega corporations, the banks, the politicians, everyone is getting richer. They get your money. And what is even worse, they get your time, they get your life. You are not even in a rat race. You're in a financial prison. But what could a solution for you look like? Honestly, I don't know, but I know what a solution for me would look like. It's very simple. I use whatever money I have and I multiply it with 1,000. This could make my life much easier and probably yours as well. If you have $1,000 available and multiply this with 1,000, I believe that this could solve some financial issue for the one or the other. Of course, if you're ugly, you would have to multiply it with much more than 1,000. My name is Markus Dahn, and this is what I decided to do. I decided to 1000x my money. This is not a joke. I know what you may be thinking. What is this guy talking about? How should this work? This is not possible. Well, I made a detailed video where I laid out my plan. And some clever folks might even want to look at this plan and copy it and do exactly what I do. This is just a little hint on the side. You have two options. You leave, you forget what you have seen. You do whatever you're doing and you hope that somehow you get some other results. Good luck with that. Or you click the link below the video. You enter your email address, because I'm not showing this to everybody. You at least watch my video on how I plan to 1000x my money. The choice is yours. Make the right choice. Join me. See what a different future you could have. See at least how I plan to do the 1000x. So click on the link below, enter your email address, and I see you on the other side. Your Markus Dahn.